Okay, in this lecture, we are going to be looking at metaphor, what it is and why metaphor matters, especially for the Psalms. And so to start this off, we really need to define what is metaphor. Now, I know you're probably familiar with the standard definitions of metaphor and simile that you probably studied in your high school English classes or even your college English class. But we want to delve just a little bit deeper into what actually is a metaphor and what it does in language. I promise this does pay off when we're studying the Psalms, so this unit is really important. And so what we're going to cover is, one, we're going to define metaphor and metaphorical language. What is the purpose of a metaphor? What does it do? We're going to look at examples from the Psalms of metaphor, and then the importance that metaphor can play for our interpretation of the Psalms. So let's look at a couple definitions of metaphor. Really, three is what we're looking at. One from philosophy, one from literature or literary definitions, and then one from linguistics, okay? So in philosophy, metaphor is often understood as a cognitive mechanism that allows us to conceptualize abstract ideas or experiences through the use of concrete imagery. It enables the transfer of meaning from one domain to another, facilitating understanding by linking unfamiliar concepts to familiar ones. Now, in terms of philosophy, we're not talking about using metaphor in philosophy, but metaphor as a philosophical category, how we describe the world. But even within philosophy, if anybody's ever studied philosophy, there's a lot of metaphor in philosophy because you're describing abstract ideas, and so you need metaphor to provide concrete images to describe the abstract concepts that you're discussing. And so philosophy has touched on metaphor, but that's not the only thing. And you're probably most familiar with the literary forms of metaphor. So from a literary theory perspective, metaphor is regarded as a figure of speech, wherein a word or phrase is applied to an object or action to which it is not literally applicable. This figurative language creates a symbolic connection, enriching the text with layers of meaning and inviting readers to engage in deeper interpretation. Pretty straightforward. And that's probably the most similar definition or the most common definition that you would see in like a English class in or literature class in high school or college, where you're looking at metaphor versus simile, using like or as, right? And that's pretty simplistic. But finally, we do have linguistics, and in linguistics, metaphor is viewed as a cognitive process. So we think, through which language shapes our understanding of the world. It involves mapping one conceptual domain onto another, thereby highlighting similarities or connections between seemingly disparate entities. Metaphor plays a fundamental role in language and thought, influencing how we perceive and communicate reality. Now, a really simple example of metaphor from a linguistics perspective is a table leg. Okay, and this is an interesting scenario because a table leg is really in our modern English language is no longer a metaphor. It is what it is. A table has legs. But at some point, early on in English, that was metaphorical language. But now we can't think of a table having anything but legs. And so metaphor affects the way we even view the world. At the simplest of, from a table leg all the way up to large concepts. So we want to ask now a really critical question at this point. How do metaphors mean? And the question inherent in that is metaphor propositional? So to put that another way, does a metaphor make claims about reality? And that's a question we kind of want to pause and think about. Does a metaphor make a truth claim about reality? So metaphors appeal to our senses and to our abstract perceptions. So we could look at these two examples right here, okay? So the snow on the ground is white. That's a propositional statement. That makes a claim about reality. I'm looking at snow. Of course, I'm in New Orleans, so it's been a while since I've seen snow, but I do know that snow is white. And so that's making a truth claim. But look at the metaphorical statement that is making a similar claim. The blanket of snow drapes the landscape in alabaster hues. Well, we have blanket and drape, so we have this fabric imagery. But then we have alabaster hues, which alabaster is a stone and it's white. So it's saying the same thing as the snow on the ground is white, except it's not, because it evokes imagery for us. So in a way, I think that metaphors do make propositional statements. They do make claims about reality. And so we have this little blurb here. Both sentences make a statement about reality, but the second one evokes emotion and imagination. It says, at the core, the same thing, but not the same thing. So let's look at some more examples, okay? In the way that metaphors use sense imagery, okay? The way they make us see, hear, taste, feel, and smell. Let's look at these examples. The city at night was a tapestry of glittering lights. Her words struck a chord with me. The victory was sweet. The relationship has cooled over the years. The scent of nostalgia filled the air. Now let's look at a few more examples as we evoke imagery, right? The forest was a cathedral of trees. Or even the forest was a cathedral of ancient trees. I mean, we could almost see an image like this of these ancient, large trees just hovering over us like a grand cathedral. The words tumbled out of his mouth like a waterfall. Her laughter echoed through the corridor like wind chimes in a breeze. These evoke imagery for us in sense perception, so we can see, touch, taste, feel the thing that is going on in a metaphor. There are other types of metaphor or poetic devices. These poetic, we call them poetic devices, not necessarily they're tied to poetry, but that poetics is a type of language in which we use non-literal sense meaning. Okay, so like synecdoche. It involves using a part of something to represent the whole, or vice versa. So it gets this part-whole relationship. So you can say like, nice set of wheels. And we're talking about the car, but we're talking about the wheels as part of the car to refer to the whole. Or I count 20 sails, ships, sailing, right? Metonymy does something similar, but it is a conceptual relationship. So if we look at these examples, this makes sense to us, right? What did the Suits come up with? And Suits is metonymy for business executives, right? Or the White House issued the following statement. Well, that actually refers to the president, but we're putting it into a conceptual relationship. Now, this only scratches the surface of metaphor. There's so much more out there that I will let you go look. We have a couple of videos in this unit that you can go see on metaphor. One that deals specifically with metaphor, and then one for metaphor in the Bible. So, but it's at this point we want to flip over and look at metaphor in the Psalms with some examples, and we'll kind of break these down and show you what's going on with these. Okay. So Psalm 23, one you're very familiar with. Now, I've got some metaphorical language in this psalm highlighted in bold to make it really easy to spot. The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside still waters. He restores my soul. So at this point, what we have is the shepherd imagery with, we're signaling shepherd in the first clause, but then lie down in green pastures and leads me beside still waters. So it's setting up this relationship between the Lord and us as shepherd to sheep. Now, this is a metaphor we're very familiar with all throughout Scripture. But then it takes that metaphor and extends to talk about our spiritual reality. He leads me in paths of righteousness. And if we go down to the next bold, your rod and your staff, they comfort me. In other words, your guidance is a comfort. So we see how this extended metaphor runs throughout this psalm, and we shepherd imagery throughout. We can also look at Psalm 1, another extended metaphor where we use compare and contrast between a tree and chaff. So he is like a tree planted by streams of water that yields its fruit in its season, and its leaf does not wither. Now this is the righteous one. It's not so with the wicked. They are like chaff that the wind drives away. So now we're comparing, contrasting in this metaphorical language with agriculture. Okay, the righteous person is like a tree firmly planted that provides its fruit in its season, but the wicked are like all the trash from gathering grains that gets blown away with the wind. And so, if we look at the background of how they used to do this, they would reap their harvest, take it up to a hilltop where the wind would blow, put all the seeds on a blanket, toss it up in the air, and let the wind blow away all the trash, all the hulls and everything that just was not good, and leave the seeds behind. And so this agricultural imagery would have very strongly conveyed this imagery of chaff just being blown away. And the wicked, they're not even going to last. They're worthless compared to a tree that bears its fruit. So again, if we dig into this metaphorical imagery, what it conveys is truth in a metaphorical sense. All right, look at Psalm 42. Also probably one that's familiar to most of you. As a deer pants for flowing streams, so pants my soul for you, O God. My soul thirsts for God, for the living God. And we continue with this thirst or food metaphor with my tears have been my food day and night. All right, let's look at now at Psalm 18. So when we encounter metaphors of this nature, we have to ask the questions. What does it mean for God to be a fortress? What does it mean for God to be a rock, a shield, a horn, a stronghold? As we look at this psalm, the Lord is my rock and my fortress and my deliverer, my God, my rock, in whom I take refuge, my shield and the horn of my salvation, my stronghold. And then as we look at the metaphor toward the end of this, the cords of death encompassed me. The torrents of destruction assailed me. The cords of Sheol entangled me. The snares of death confronted me. Now, I'm not going to give you answers on this, but if we look at these couple of Psalms, as we've looked at these examples, they're chock full of metaphorical imagery. So, kind of leaves us with this question. Why does metaphor matter so much? And why are the Psalms so chock full of it? Here's a couple of thoughts, and this doesn't cover the whole gambit, but it's just to get you thinking about it, okay? Metaphors matter. They communicate truths that might otherwise be incommunicable or lack power or oomph. And they do this in several ways. But furthermore, metaphors convey meaning through emotive language. They were powerful and memorable ways to communicate. So let's talk about these couple of bullet points really quickly. Metaphors are powerful tools for expressing abstract and complex spiritual truths. The Psalms often use metaphorical language to convey profound concepts. Just look at the way we describe God himself. And in the modern New Testament church, if we talk about God and we talk about Trinity, we actually use metaphorical language. God as Father, Jesus as Son. The church is the bride of Christ. These are relational metaphors that we use. But there are spiritual truths behind those relational metaphors. Secondly, biblical metaphors make biblical passages more vivid and memorable. They help convey messages in a way that engages the imagination and the emotions, making the teachings of the Bible more impactful and enduring. All right, metaphors engage the cognitive faculties by inviting readers to make connections between the known and the unknown. They stimulate thought, prompting readers to explore deeper meanings and connections within the text. All right, fourth, metaphors provide imagery for abstract or complex theological concepts, making the ideas more accessible. And finally, metaphors can challenge preconceptions and push readers to reconsider their understanding of certain concepts. So as we read through the Psalms, look for metaphorical language. And as you come across this metaphorical language, ask questions of it. Why is this like this? Why is this particular concept compared to agriculture or hunger? Or why is God called a rock, a fortress, a shield? What does that convey? What truth is being conveyed by that metaphor? And why is it put in a metaphor rather than just saying, well, God will protect us. God will come to battle for us. These are the type of questions when you come across metaphor that help you exegete passages correctly. All right? And to think more deeply about it, which is one of the powerful ways that metaphor works, is it causes us to pause and to think and to connect. And so that's what I want to leave you with metaphors. Just this short video lecture, but we've also got the 2 other videos I'd like you to watch in this unit on metaphor that go into a little more detail. This is more the theoretical side. So hope you enjoyed, and see you in the next unit.